In this video, we are going to be looking at experimental design and the ethics behind our experiments. We're going to identify the practice and ethical concerns that arise when conducting a study. And so first we're going to just start with some vocabulary. We're going to talk about what an explanatory variable is, and that is the first variable that should cause a change in a second variable. The response variable is the second variable. And the purpose of experiments is to investigate the relationship between these two variables. Now, in a randomized experiment, the researcher is always trying to find how the explanatory variable is affecting the response variable, and we're measuring the results. The treatments are the different values of the explanatory variable. So the treatments could be you're given a pill or you're not given a pill. That would be the two different treatments. The experimental unit is a single object or individual that's going to be measured. So the experimental unit could be the person who receives the pill or the person who does not receive the pill. Lurking variables are variables that can cloud a study, that may not be a variable that you are actually observing or trying to observe. And to prove that the explanatory variable is causing a change in response variable, it's really important to try to isolate the explanatory variable and try to eliminate as much of the lurking variables. So as an example, if we're going to be looking at in a moment, if I give people a pill and I'm trying to decide whether or not this pill is going to be effective in curing some disease, one of the lurking variables could be maybe the person doesn't have the disease, or maybe the disease is genetic for some people and not others. So that could be a lurking variable. So they could have been told they had the disease and they really don't. Or I'm not taking into consideration the health of the patients to start out with. So that could be a lurking variable. The random assignment is how we put the people in the experiment. We try to randomly assign them into two groups typically. The first one is being the control group, and the control group would be the one that gets the placebo. And the placebo is the one that is like, okay, so if I have the two groups, the control group who gets the placebo, and then the other group who gets the actual medication. The placebo is a pill that doesn't have the medication in it. So the placebo is the one that doesn't actually have the treatment in the whatever I'm giving as an experiment. So whether it's a pill or whatever. So that's what the placebo is. It's the actual not medication that I'm observing. And then a control group, of course, is the group that gets the placebo. When we are designing our experiments, we want to put them into these groups, but we don't want to tell them that they're getting the placebo, so we call it blinding. We're going to do a blind experiment, which means that the people that is in the control group, the one that's getting the placebo, doesn't actually know that they're getting a placebo. A double blind experiment is when not only do the subjects not know they're getting the placebo, but the researchers who are doing the research don't know who is the control group and who is not the control group. The next thing we're going to look at is matched pairs, and that's when we match pairs of participants by relevant characteristics. So a researcher may randomly assign one person from each pair to the treatment group and the other to the control group. So say that I am looking at pregnant women in their 9th term, and I might decide that I'm going to look at pregnant women in their 9th term, and I'm going to have the grouped by age. So I'm going to have those who are under the age of 25, between 20 and 25. One woman would be into the control group, and one person would be in the group that gets whatever I am using as an experiment. So they're grouped by, they're randomly assigned, but they're also grouped by age, and I'm going to make sure that they're a matched pair based on the characteristic of their age and being 9 months pregnant. So here's an example. A researcher wants to investigate taking aspirin regularly to reduce the risk of heart attack. We have 400 men between the ages of 50 and 84. They're going to be recruited as participants, I assumed randomly selected. The men are divided randomly into two groups. One group will take the aspirin and the other group will take the placebo. Each man taken one pill a day for 3 years, but that person who's taken the pill does not know whether or not he's taken the aspirin or the placebo. At the end of the study, the researcher counts the number of men in each group who have had a heart attack. So what is the explanatory and what is the response variable in this study? Well, we're looking at whether or not aspirins affect the heart attack. So the explanatory part would be taking the medication. And that includes the placebo. The response variable is whether or not the men had the heart attack. So whether or not the subject had the heart attack. What are the treatments? Well, the treatments are the aspirin and then the placebo. Who is a population that we're looking at? Well, the population is all men between 50 and 84 years old. Is this a match pair design? No, we didn't know anything about that, so we're going to say no, we're not matching the men by age. Say the men between 50 and 60. Nope, we're just saying no, it's not, because we don't have any of that information. What is the sample? Well, the sample is the 400 men that were selected. What is the experimental units? And that is the individual men. Well, what are some lurking studies? And we kind of talked about this earlier, is that it could be the exercise of the fitness of the men that are in the study. So exercise, diet, genetic predisposition of the heart disease. So these could affect our outcomes. So those are some lurking variables. Okay, now the last part of this video isn't very long. We're just going to talk about the ethics. And so because you can design experiments that are going to be biased toward or against some outcome, right? We've talked about being biased, and that in the past, some things have been a little shady, especially if it involves people and other experiments that involve living things. So we have in the United States, the Department of Health and Human Services oversees any kind of research that happens with humans. And this oversight committee is known as the Institutional Review Board. And they have to approve in advance any study that involves humans. And the key things that come out of this is they're looking at the risks to the participant, and they have to be minimized and reasonable with respect to the projected benefits. So ethically, our experiment with the men having the aspirin and the non-aspirin, is that going to be an issue? What are the risks involved? How do we minimize those risks? That would be the things that the IRB would be doing. The participants must know that they're in the study. They have to have informed consent, so they have to understand the risks involved in participating, and it has to be clearly explained to the subjects that are in the study. The subjects must consent in writing, and the researchers are required to keep documentation of their consent. And then the data collected from individuals must be guarded carefully to protect their privacy. So that also goes to the whole HIPAA thing here in the United States, is that all the patients, or in this case, the people in the study, the individuals in the study, have to have whatever information they give to the study to be protected, so that it doesn't go out and everybody knows that they're in the study, because maybe they don't want people to know they're in the study. And that's it for this video. Nice short one, and we'll go over any questions you have in class.